We're not talking about money today. We're talking about attraction. And I don't mean the law of attraction. And I'm not going to give you a philosophical or theological treatise on the intrinsic value of attraction, if there is any, or I'm not going to give you a anthropological ontology grounding attraction in man. I'm not going to give you any of that. I'm going to tell you what I think attraction is and the threats of it and how we are to safeguard attraction if possible. Just to give you a quick rundown, if you were curious, I operate, especially in regards to attractions or inclinations, I have a Maximilian worldview, and this is coming from Maximus the Confessor. He's I believe a 5th or 7th century Byzantinian Orthodox Greek theologian, and he says that passions or inclinations are a byproduct of passibility and incorruptibility that the human voluntarily assumed with the Adamic fall. Now, what are these inclinations and passions? Well, these inclinations and passions, I suppose you could say, are inherent urges that arise out of the person. If you ask Freud in his Illusion of Time, he says that man is inherently destructive, and once this psychological fact has been established, society can't divert from it. I'm not a fan of the strict deterministic or physicalist rendition of this argument. The determinist will tell you that in a causal determinants relationship, X is the only antecedent to Y. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, if you have an attraction to ice cream, therefore you must eat ice cream. And the determinist tries to make it as if this is applicable everywhere. If we go by this reasoning and we just use a reductio ad absurdum and use said logic to its most absurd point, then virtually what you have is, if Agent X is attracted to minors, then Agent X must seek minors. I don't agree with that. Virtually, I haven't met very many determinists who do agree with that. But this isn't necessarily a philosophical argument. I'm really just trying to dance around the intrinsic qualities of attraction. Now, attraction can hurt you and it can harm you. You can be attracted to things that don't push you forward. Like, people who struggle with substance abuse. There is definitely an element of attraction in indulging in such a behavior. There is a small element of gratification. I know this from a conceptual and perceptual perspective. I've lived this. One of the biggest things that needs to be said about attraction is that attraction often masquerades as entitlement. There's this, psychologically your brain will create justification on why you must or why you are entitled to X. It's really crazy. Or why you should have X. Your brain will create reasons on your brain will create avenues to circumvent established parameters like, ethical or moral commitments. I'm not just telling you something, conceptual. I'm not just telling you something. I'm not just telling you something that I came up with. I'm telling you something that I know, that I've lived, that I've experienced. And nevertheless, or I'm sorry, not nevertheless, but you'll find yourself in a situation where, you know, you're one decision away from a heinous decision. And retrospectively, you're looking back on it like, oh man, how did I get here? Well, it's because attraction. Well, at least how I'm using attraction. And attraction, like I said, attraction can be inclination in any manner. People are attracted to all sorts of things. And since we're using inclination, I guess we can add a bit of nuance / delineation to this, and, you know, break it up into necessary and unnecessary attractions. So, like, I guess unnecessary attractions would be like to innumerable wealth, jewelry, women, drugs, things of that nature. And necessary inclinations would be relationship, commitment, water. Anyways, failure to establish parameters around an inclination will result in overindulgence. Overindulgence is indicative of gluttony. Gluttony is indicative of discontent. Discontent is indicative of overcompensation. You're not happy or not satisfied, especially not happy, because happiness has been erected to some ephemeral grandeur today. But if you're not happy, you will look for means to satiate this, whether big, little, tall, or small. You got to get your fill. Does inclination fit into this? Let me give you an analogy to help bring it all to circle. All dads, I think, all dads want their daughters to marry a man that's better than them in virtually all capacities, and especially the capacities that are needed to be the most optimal husband for their daughter. Now, all men who come to my doorstep to court my daughter, of course, want to give me grandchildren. That's almost a non-negotiable. Now, that's also not the only factor in what decides if my daughter will marry said man. And so, attraction or inclination to my daughter isn't the issue. But if this inclination is, if this inclination is the sole desire, or if this inclination isn't primarily chaste or primarily holy, then it will inevitably devolve into some perverted shadow of its intended version. If you eat food without watching your caloric intake, you'll put on more pounds than intended before your hot girl summer. You take 2 extra shots of whiskey every night, you end up with cirrhosis and acute liver failure 10 to 15 years before your intended date. The point I'm trying to elucidate, if you haven't ascertained it already, is inclinations in and of itself isn't bad. I don't know if inclinations in and of itself contain any intrinsic value, simpliciter, full sin. But what I am saying is unguided, entitled inclinations will only ruin you. It will only ruin you. And you can take it from me. I think I know what I'm talking about. But that's all for this inclination segment. I don't know what I want to talk about next, but I'm sure it'll be just as good as this. If you enjoyed this, I'm not even going to say subscribe, just, come get some more information again sometime. Peace.